listening to The Kula Ring, a podcast made for manufacturing marketers. Here are Carman Perry and Jeff White.
Welcome to The Kula Ring, a podcast for manufacturing marketers brought to you by Kula Partners. My name is Jeff White, and joining me today is Carman Perry. Carman, how you doing, sir?
I'm delighted to be here, and you?
I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah. Look, as we talked about today's episode, it really occurred to me that we were, this is not a new problem. Like what we're talking about is not even necessarily new advice. The problem is just marketers haven't listened to it yet. So we're going to choose to reiterate it on behalf of marketing writ large, oddly, in some weird way.
And we really only have one message today.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Let's start with a story. So November 25th, coming into winter in the northern hemisphere, and November 25th, 1999. You probably don't remember what you were doing, but if you lived in North America, chances are on that Thursday evening you were watching Friends, because almost everybody did then.
Can you imagine having that now?
Yeah, that dynamic doesn't obviously
of everybody enjoying the same thing at the same time. Anyway, we digress.
Yeah. Chances are you were watching Friends, and if you were, you'll remember potentially that was that episode was the one where Ross got high.
Which is actually the name of the episode.
Yeah.
They all start with the one where.
Yeah. I thought I just assumed everybody listening knew that.
Not necessarily. It could just be you.
Yeah, maybe. Okay.
Extra.
So
editorializing.
So it's the one where Ross got hired. We're not talking about the main plot of the show. There was a subplot in that particular episode where Rachel makes dessert. And those of you listening may now be starting to remember the episode, because she had I think there were some pages in the cookbook or what have you that is stuck together. So she had thought she was making a trifle, and she ended up making a combination, if you will, between a trifle and a shepherd's pie. and if you remember that moment, Ross takes a bite. And his remark is that it tastes like feet, and
I can still hear it in my head.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it tastes like feet.
And if you're Joey, he follows up with, I like it. Custard good, jam good, meat good. Like it's all good. So I'm going somewhere with this. I think that there, for an awful lot of marketers, and even worse for some of the people that those marketers answer to, when it comes to marketing, they're a lot more like Joey, which is to say they can always think of more things to add, and adding more stuff is not making
it's not making it worse.
Not in their minds.
No.
Right. But in everybody else's, they're not convinced. So this is what we're talking about today, is this notion that kind of like in the world of marketing, in the world of messaging, when we're trying to persuade people, when we're trying to get a message across,
or trigger an action,
or what have you, there is considerable benefit to focus. More in this case is less. And so I think this is particularly acute in B2B, because I think the B2C marketers some of them have learned this, because I think they frankly are more practiced at creating advertising in the sense of the way we think about advertising. And so therefore they're more likely to work with creative agencies that have stressed the importance of being single-minded in a brief, etc. They've kind of been introduced to that notion. But my goodness, for an awful lot of B2B manufacturing marketers, that discipline, if it exists even within the marketing function, very often is challenged elsewhere in the organization as that marketing execution bumps up against approvals, right?
Yeah, no, you can. I mean, we've been in these situations where you're presenting something, it's about the one thing, and what you end up with is a request to have, it's, I think you call it the, just another and, like just, well, can you have this and this? And we need to talk about these specs. And, our buyers are very technical. They need to know everything.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting, like, our buyers are very technical, therefore they are not human, and the rules of attention need not apply, and we need to tell them everything all at once. Probably where I've seen the worst offense is when it comes to, well, I don't know if it's the worst, but homepage carousels.
Yes.
They're putting a carousel on a homepage. You're like, just add another one, add another slide, add another slide, and people think like, oh, if we added 20 slides to the carousel, well, it's like,
There's 20 opportunities for people to engage in a different way, and someone will find exactly what they're looking for.
yeah, but the attention span doesn't increase 20 times because you put 20 times more slides.
Yeah, and I mean, not it doesn't only introduce too many options. We've analyzed literally thousands of homepages, some of which have had carousels using screen recording software and heat maps and other things like that. Almost no one gets past the first one anyway. So maybe in that way, at least you're kind of lucky. But what you're doing is you're then removing the thing that that person may have been interested in, the one action you wanted them to take, and then give them another one, and then 3 seconds later another one, and then another one.
And then worse yet, you're paying for each of them. Like, everything that you put up there costs in some way money or effort to do so. And
Hmm.
the only reason you're doing it is to fool yourself. It's just so you can tell yourself a story that you are somehow saying more and communicating more. But that, again, that is predicated, and it assumes that somebody's actually listening or ingesting on the other end. And I guess that's what I want people to understand, is that marketing is a zero-sum game. It's always 100%. A homepage is 100% of a homepage. It's You can choose to double the length of the homepage, and it's still a 100% homepage. Adding 20 more CTAs doesn't make it 20 more anything. Like, it's a displacement. It's like liquid in a glass. If you have a glass full of liquid and you drop something in it, the equal amount is going to come out. It's just the way of it. And that's the way attention is.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it doesn't necessarily it doesn't mean you're a bad person to add more CTAs to the page. It just means you don't necessarily understand how people want to be communicated to and how they consume things by default. You're not really thinking about, and you're not directing them to do the thing that you really need them to do to get to the next stage.
And look, or at least if you are doing that, I'm kind of encouraging people to do so consciously. To say, look, I know I'm introducing 3 CTAs here, and this is a choice I'm making for whatever reason. But you also ought to know why. Why you would most likely be better served by trying to force more focus rather than accepting more ands. And more, what I'm trying to do here in this episode, I think, is just to give people some ammunition for those conversations that they're having with folks about any kind of marketing execution when they bump up against somebody that maybe is in the approval chain or what have you, that says, oh, I like what you've done here, but can we also just include this?
Hmm.
Um, in almost every case, that is a choice to dilute attention, which in almost every case will detract from the main desired action that you want, or that those folks to take, or the main message that you want them to ingest. It is by necessity the case. So I think that's just what we ought to be aware of. And where most people, especially outside of the marketing function that marketing sometimes has to answer to, they just don't get this.
Yeah. And I mean, it sounds a bit harsh to suggest that doing so is not respecting your audience, but in a way it isn't. I mean, in a way, you're not respecting your audience's ability to absorb things appropriately and kind of be led through their journey with you. And you're trying to get them to consider everything all at once, which they just simply cannot do.
Yeah.
You're not respecting them.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's an interesting way to think of it because, um, it's embedded in a level of empathy for the audience and a desire to try to understand them. But in some ways, it's a bit of a false choice too, because you're not really choosing between do I choose to respect the audience and therefore only communicate what's essential right now and then let an experience unfold that I've created. Is that something that it's a choice between that and trying to do everything, and by trying to do everything actually getting nothing, because they're not going to pay attention to the everything. Like the marketer, or sometimes the people approving the marketing, that's what they're thinking. Oh, well, we have a choice to communicate one thing or everything. Well, I'm going to choose everything then. I'd be an idiot to only choose the one thing. But it's actually not. It's actually a choice between communicating one thing and communicating nothing.
Yeah. What was that that thing David Ogilvy said that you mentioned the other day?
I think he said a lot of things.
Yeah, but it was specifically related to this about, it's around the idea of respecting your.
Yeah, it is a notion of respecting your customer. It's, again, a B2C reference probably, of course, but the customer is not a moron. She's your wife.
Ignoring the patriarchal element of that.
Yeah,
and
well,
where it came from, but
I kind of like part of that. The notion, the husband-wife part of that is kind of interesting too, because embedded in that is that she chose you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're assuming she's a moron, then what, and makes bad choices, so let's talk about that choice. Like, it's kind of,
there's a lot of layers to that.
yeah, there's a good little dig in there, but the sentiment is, of course, one of, uh, respect the audience, and in some ways it's an interesting thing when you say, oh, our audience is very technical, we have an engineering audience, and therefore we're going to respect their desire and thirst for information, and we're going to give it all to them right at once. It's like, no, that's not. They're still human. They still consume information in a human way. They're not robots because they're engineers.
You can still orchestrate that experience and allow them to discover the information they need, but you have to realize you can't do it through 7 CTAs that are all competing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's I think it's just I hope we've given folks a couple of extra kind of tools in their tool chest to help win these arguments and make your marketing messaging more single-minded. I think you'll find it certainly increases its effectiveness.
We'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to The Kula Ring with Carman Perry and Jeff White. Don't miss a single manufacturing marketing insight. Subscribe now at kulapartners.com/The Kula Ring. That's KULApartners.com/The Kula Ring.